Hello guys, welcome to another video, and we're just about a week away from the beginning of the Phrecia event, and I wanted to do a video here talking about some Vaal skill tech that you can use in that upcoming Phrecia event. And obviously we don't have the changes for the ascendancies just yet. Some of it actually already exists in the current game, and it's going to just be amplified by what we have access to in Phrecia, and other stuff is going to be, new things that you can do with some of the ascendancies. So first of all, let's talk about the Behemoth. Now I think this class is the one that's most likely to get the largest buff when it comes to the patch notes, because it really wasn't used very much at all. And obviously the prime node there is the Rampager node that blocks spell usage, and that's a big topic at the moment. A lot of people are asking for that to be removed. Personally, I think GGG are more likely to go the route of buffing everything else and keeping that identity on the ascendancy. But we'll see what ends up happening in the patch notes whenever they do come rolling around. Now the Behemoth has this branch up here, which is a rage-based branch here. This one here grants you a chance to gain up to your maximum rage on hit whenever you would gain rage, and it also adds some extra maximum rage there, 15 maximum rage. And this one here is basically a nerfed version of Hateforge. It makes it so that you can use Vaal attack skills by spending rage instead of souls. So it basically converts that soul cost into a rage cost, and then it increases that rage cost of skills by 50%. Obviously on the Hateforge unique gloves, this is a reduced rage cost of skills modifier, so that's the nerfed version there of Hateforge. And then it says that you cannot gain rage during soul gain prevention. Now the reason why I want to bring this up is because of the Foulborn Vaal Caress. That's a pair of gloves, and those gloves, instead of granting Onslaught when you use a Vaal skill, they grant Adrenaline for 3 seconds. And so by combining this with Vaal Ground Slam, which is a skill that has a particularly low soul gain prevention timer and a low soul cost, so the soul gain prevention there just 1 second and the soul cost 15, usually a lot of Vaal skills have very high soul costs and long soul gain preventions, so you're going to be able to spend rage instead of souls, and that will be increased there by that rage cost, so it'll probably be about 23 rage per usage of the Vaal Ground Slam. But then you use it, and then 1 second later you can immediately start gaining rage again. But every time you use that skill, you gain adrenaline for 3 seconds. And adrenaline is a really strong buff. It grants you 100% increased damage, 25% increased movement speed, attack speed, and cast speed, and 10% additional physical damage reduction. So that's a fantastic buff to have on pretty much any build. And that is going to be really nice to have in combination with this, because you're going to be able to basically keep it up all the time, right? Every time you kind of run out of adrenaline, you just reuse your Vaal Ground Slam. You don't even have to be using Vaal Ground Slam as a main ability. You can just be benefiting from the rage on your other attacks. You can stack maximum rage and have a lot of rage to actually boost up your damage there just from the more damage multiplier. But then you can essentially use this node right here as a method to permanently gain adrenaline all of the time. And because you're spending rage, you are not spending souls, therefore you can actually have this in boss fights as well. You're not prevented there from, gaining souls as you would be if you're using the skill normally. No, you can just gain rage as you normally would do by attacking, and you can just maintain adrenaline all the time, which is quite strong. But this tech, as good as that sounds as, having adrenaline all the time, it really depends on what happens to the Behemoth Ascendancy in the patch notes, because this node right here of blocking spells is a pretty cool idea in concept, I think, but the Ascendancy itself, the other nodes here, are just not strong enough to warrant that downside, so we'll see what they do in the patch notes. Now, the next bit of tech that I want to discuss is to do with the Architect of Chaos and the Chaos Bloodline. Now, this is some tech that already existed in the previous Phrecia event, and it exists in the current game now as well, thanks to the Chaos Bloodline, and that is a tech where you're able to chain Vaal Cold Snap back to back for a very long duration without caring about the soul gain prevention, because you have a very low soul cost. Now, Vaal Cold Snap is a skill that has 35 souls per use, and it can store 1 use. So you use this skill normally, and it lasts for 4 seconds. Maybe that's scaled up by a bit of skill effect duration, but it doesn't last very long. However, there's some tech that existed in the previous Phrecia event. I believe this originated from Uber Dan, who made a build in Hardcore Trade revolving around this tech. And basically, you make use of the Shepherd of Souls keystone-like effect there from this node right here. Now, Shepherd of Souls is the second line there, you can see, and it says Vaal non-aura skills have 80% less soul cost, and Vaal non-aura skills have 100% increased soul cost per Vaal skill used in the past 8 seconds. So essentially, if you're able to make a Vaal skill have a duration that's longer than 8 seconds, or it lasts for about 8 seconds or a little bit longer, it means you never incur that 100% increased soul cost. That's what this tech is all about. You make Vaal Cold Snap last for about 8 seconds or a little bit longer, and that way you can always benefit from the 80% less cost without ever incurring that 100% increased cost. Now you combine that with the Fever of Corruption, which is another node on this ascendancy, which is 50% increased Vaal skill effect duration and 50% reduced souls per use. What that's going to do is it's going to bring the base soul cost down from 35 to 18, and then the less soul cost modifier is going to bring that 18 down to 4. So you're going to spend 4 souls per use, and that means that with the full stored 35 souls, you can use the skill 8 times before it fully depletes all of its souls. On top of that, the Fever of Corruption also has the 50% increased Vaal skill effect duration, which is allowing you to get to that 8 seconds a little bit faster there. So you use this and you go from the base 4 seconds on Vaal Cold Snap up to 6 seconds, and then you can make use of skill effect duration on the tree. If you take this wheel right here, this is another 45%, plus the 10% more skill effect duration mastery, and you'll already be over 8 seconds. And then you can, of course, use some extra skill effect duration if you want to. For example, the damage over time mastery is really good for that for another 15%. So that's the base tech, and the reason why that's quite strong in Phrecia in particular is because this ascendancy here kind of revolves around Vaal skills, and you have this node right here, which is +3 to level of all Vaal skill gems, and that's obviously really strong for damage as well for Vaal Cold Snap. So the idea is you basically load into a map, you use the first pack of monsters to gain a bunch of Vaal souls, and then from that point onwards, you just chain Vaal Cold Snap back to back to back, and you basically have this aura-like effect around you, somewhat similar to Righteous Fire. You're just running through the map, killing everything with Vaal Cold Snap. That's pretty cool, and in this patch, in this upcoming Phrecia event, we're going to have even more tech to do with that, because you can do a little bit more to kind of make the tech even stronger. That's because you can now combine it with the Chaos Bloodline. Now, the Chaos Bloodline has this choice node here, which allows you to choose between 3 different notables. And the interesting thing is that each of these nodes benefit this tech in different ways. So you can actually kind of choose which one you want to use, and you can change which one you actually use based on how you're progressing with the build and how the build feels to play. So, the first one is the Priest of Yalmak. Now, what this does is it has the 20% reduced soul gain prevention duration. That modifier is not important at all for this tech. What is important is the less soul cost, and the Vaal skills have 20% chance to regain consumed souls when used. So let's talk about the less soul cost first. On the base tech, you have a 4 cost of souls, so that's going to go down to 3 souls per use. That already increases your amount of uses from 8 to 11. So you go from having 8 uses that you can chain back to back to 11 uses. That means that you have a longer duration of Vaal Cold Snap for the map. And it might be the case that you don't need that extra duration, right? It might be the case that you have enough damage that you clear a map as fast as just those 8 chained back to back, in which case you might want to use some of the other tech that we'll talk about in just a moment. But of all of the 3 options here, this one allows you to extend the duration of Vaal Cold Snap by a huge amount, and therefore you can just have it chaining back to back for much, much longer. So that's 11 uses, but then you also have the 20% chance to regain consumed souls. You can combine that with Atziri's Reign, which is a jewel that's normally limited to 1, so this is quite a rare stat. Vaal skills have a chance to regain consumed souls. It's a rare stat. This one is a corrupted jewel. You get it by corrupting Crimson Jewels, and it rolls between 15 and 20% on both of these stats, so the Vaal skill effect duration is quite useful here for this tech, but the more important one there is the chance to regain consumed souls. If you have a max roll on that, you're going to have a total 40% chance to actually regain the consumed souls when you use the skill, and that means your 11 effective uses is going to improve to around 15 on average. So you're going to have 15 uses chained back to back, and that's going to have over 2 minutes duration in total. So obviously, if you need more duration for the map, if you're doing maps with awkward layouts or things like that, this may be the node that you want to use. Then we have the Priest of Kopek, which is a really interesting node because it's the only place in the game where you can add a use to Vaal skills, and adding a use is really interesting in terms of the mechanics. So this one adds +1 use, and that means that, for example, on Vaal Cold Snap here, you can normally only store 1 use. That will be 2 uses that you can store, and therefore the amount of souls that you can store for this skill gem goes from 35 to 70. Now this node also has increased soul cost per use. Now that modifier right there is additive with the reduced soul cost on the Architect of Chaos node here. This is 50% reduced soul cost, and this one here is 40% increased. So that's going to result in a 10% reduced soul cost in total, which means that the cold snap cost of 35 goes down to 32 at a baseline, and then with the 80% less, it goes down to 7 souls per use. However, you can store 70 souls rather than 35, therefore you have 10 total uses that you can chain back to back. But on top of that, you'll also have a little bit more damage with this node here, so this is basically like a middle ground between having a longer duration and having a shorter duration with more damage. You get a bit more duration compared to the base tech because you have 10 uses instead of 8, but you also have a little bit more damage there. So again, it depends on how you're feeling with clearing maps and whether you have a bunch of extra duration left over. And if you do, you may want to look into this third node here, which is Priest of Kamasa. So this is Vaal Skills have 50% increased skill effect duration, Vaal Skills have 50% increased area effect, and the last modifier there we're not interested in for this tech. Those two modifiers there at the top are very, very important. The first one is 50% increased skill effect duration. Now, if you combine that with the Architect of Chaos skill effect duration, that means you'll have 100% increased skill effect duration, and you'll immediately reach an 8-second duration on Vaal Cold Snap, and you'll basically just be able to head over here, and you're likely to take this wheel anyway for the damage over time multiplier. Then you can get the increased skill effect duration there on the mastery, and that means that you already have just over 8 seconds in total for each Vaal Cold Snap, and importantly, that means that this node right here allows you to not go for this duration wheel, right? You don't have to path all the way here to get this duration wheel. You also don't need to take the mastery, and that is a really big buff for this type of build because it means you're probably saving in the region of 8 skill points, depending on which area you're coming in to this node from, and that's huge. You can spend those 8 points on, more damage or more defense. On top of that, you also have this 50% increased area effect, which is really, really nice. So this one is probably the best kind of end game solution there where you can, remove some of your points and spend them elsewhere. Especially if you already have a lot of front-loaded damage with your build, you already have very good gear, and you're able to clear the map with ease in that 60-second or so window. Now, the last bit of Vaal tech that I want to discuss in this video is the Harbinger ascendancy, which has this node right here. Now, this is buffs on you expire 30% slower, debuffs on you expire 30% faster. This is exactly the same as the Rune Graft of the Warp, and you can stack it with the Rune Graft of the Warp. When you do that, you have buffs on you expire 60% slower. That is ridiculous. That is so powerful. And you're going to be able to keep a Vaal aura on yourself permanently, all of the time. So take a look at these Vaal aura skills. Let's begin with Vaal Grace. This has a base duration of 6 seconds and a soul gain prevention duration of 9 seconds, so usually it'd be pretty hard to keep this up permanently. You'll also notice that on the skill there it says modifiers to buff duration also apply to this skill's soul gain prevention. So for example, if you take the increased skill effect duration here from this wheel, or if you take the more skill effect duration from the mastery, or if you click this mastery here on the reservation mastery there, which says 50% increased duration for non-curse aura skills, all of those things would apply to the soul gain prevention duration. However, buff expiry rate does not apply to the soul gain prevention period, which means that you can have the buff effectively lasting longer on you without actually increasing its duration through modifiers to skill effect duration. Now, at a baseline, if you have this node here combined with the Rune Graft of the Warp, Vaal Grace at 6 seconds is going to effectively last 15 seconds. So you'll have a 6-second window in which the soul gain prevention is gone and you're able to regain souls whilst you still have the buff. But this gets even crazier if you also include some modifiers to skill effect duration. So for example, you can use this reservation mastery here that I just mentioned for non-curse aura skills have 50% increased duration. Now if you do that, the Vaal Grace duration will go from 6 seconds to 9 seconds as a baseline. Meanwhile, the soul gain prevention duration will go from 9 seconds to 13.5 seconds. However, the Vaal Grace buff will effectively last 22.5 seconds on you, providing a 9-second window to regain souls whilst you still have the buff. Then we have Vaal Haste. which is another aura. This one arguably is stronger for most builds because, you know, Vaal Grace is more kind of evasion focused and spell suppression focused, whereas haste here can be used on a lot of builds to good benefit. And this one is a 4-second base duration with a 6-second soul gain prevention. Now, with the 60% slower expiry of buffs, this will effectively last 10 seconds, providing you a window of 4 seconds to regain souls whilst you still have the buff. But you can improve that window even further with what we just mentioned there, with the Reservation Mastery for 50% increased duration. That's going to increase the Vaal Haste duration up to 6 seconds, and the soul gain prevention up to 9. And at a 6-second base duration, Vaal Haste will effectively last 15 seconds with the slower expiry, providing a 6-second window to regain souls. However, you can also make use of more duration support. So this right here is a level 21 more duration with 20% quality, and that grants 50% more skill effect duration. So, along with the Mastery for 50% increased skill effect duration, that will mean that the Vaal Haste duration goes from 4 seconds baseline to 6, then the more skill effect duration modifier makes it go from 6 to 9. Meanwhile, both of those modifiers also apply to the soul gain prevention. So the soul gain prevention goes from 6 seconds to 9, and then 9 seconds to 13.5 seconds. So you end up with a 9-second duration buff, with a 13.5 second duration soul gain prevention. But that 9-second buff will actually last an effective 22.5 seconds with the slower buff expiry, providing you a 9-second window to regain the souls needed to use the skill again. Then we have Vaal Clarity. This is an interesting one because it makes it so that your skills cost no mana, right? You have no mana cost at all. Maybe there's a way that you can abuse this. This is quite strong of a buff to have up all the time. And this one has a very high base duration of 10 seconds. And even though the soul gain prevention duration is 14 seconds, that doesn't really matter because with the slower expiry rate there of 60%, this buff is going to effectively last 25 seconds. So at a baseline with no other investment, you'll have an 11-second window to regain those souls to use it again. And with the 50% Mastery, it will be a 15-second buff duration with a 21-second soul gain prevention, but the buff will effectively last 37.5 seconds, providing you a 16.5 second window. So that one is very, very easy to keep up permanently. And lastly, I want to mention Vaal Smite. Now, this is a skill that already can be kept up permanently, right? It already has a base duration of 8 seconds and a soul gain prevention of 6, so you can already make this permanent in the normal game without much effort put in. But I wanted to mention this one because Vaal Smite is a pretty good damage boost on a lot of builds because it isn't kind of tied to an attack or a spell. It's just a global added lightning damage buff, and therefore it can be used on quite a lot of builds. Now, the reason why I wanted to mention this in regards to the Harbinger is because usually Vaal Smite is a little bit annoying because if you want to use, you know, another Vaal skill and the Vaal soul gain prevention is getting in the way there, or perhaps you just don't want to keep using this too often. But with the Harbinger tech that we just discussed, this is going to have a ridiculous duration, so you don't have to use it anywhere near as much. So just at a baseline with the tech, this is going to last 20 seconds instead of 8. And then with the duration mastery, it will be 30 seconds. And with the more duration support, it will be 45 seconds. So that should be quite an effective skill that you can add to a lot of builds in terms of Harbinger. I'm not really sure what builds are going to be played on that ascendancy, but that is definitely some tech that you can look at. But that is kind of it for this video. I just wanted to go over that Vaal tech that you could use in the upcoming Phrecia event. Obviously, we don't have the patch nodes. Some of these nodes could be completely gone. But I think that in a lot of ways, the ascendancies are going to retain their identity. So we're just going to see a lot of numerical changes, I think. But we'll have to wait and see for that one. Hopefully we'll be getting the patch notes in the next few days so that we can begin theory crafting builds for League launch. Thanks for watching this video. And as always, stay tuned and stay safe.